So Shaurya,
No problem.
thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi.
As a yeah, as a short introduction to Shaurya, he is working with DeepSource and he has been building some amazing static analysis tools. He has worked on as a master of Python and Go, and now is currently working with PHP and Scala, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
Great. And I'm just curious. I'd like to know a little bit about the Thought Chimney. So if you could tell us a little
So
bit about that.
I used to have this blog. I used to post often on that. So that was mostly about. So my friends used to call me a chimney. So I just thought maybe that would be
I can, I
maybe
can,
that would
I
be a
can,
good name.
I can guess why.
Yeah. So that's why I named it the Thought Chimney, and then so mostly posting stuff, developer stuff.
Hmm. So do you still post? Because I haven't seen any recent posts. I mean, you
No,
should
no.
start it again.
Yeah, I'm planning to start it again.
You should. I mean, it's a wonderful thing to have a blog of your own. You can share so many ideas with people. I think it's a wonderful initiative, and you should continue this. Well, that's just my opinion. Well, I'll leave the rest up to you. Anyway,
Thank you.
so Shaurya, I'll leave you with our viewers and take it away. All the best.
Sure, sure. Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Yeah. So, hey, hi everyone. My name is Shaurya, and I've been working here at DeepSource for about I don't know, about 2 years now. So today I'll be talking about how to ship better code using JavaScript and of course using DeepSource. So let's start. So a bit about me, like Digvijay already said. So I've been building tools for programmers at DeepSource. So we are currently into building static analysis tools. We'll get into what static analysis tools are, and I mostly write Python and Go, and I have been writing some PHP. Let us not just PHP programmers anymore. And I'm also learning Scala. So yeah, so that's a bit about me, and let us start with how to have a good life in general. So as programmers, so I think the most important thing that we tend to miss is if something can go wrong, it will go wrong. So that's essentially Murphy's law. So we should essentially verify everything that we think might go wrong. So that includes writing tests, that includes reviewing code properly, that includes not shipping on Fridays, for example. So that, and then of course if there are things that can be automated, for example, if you are reviewing somebody's code and you know that some issues should always be checked for example, using double equal to's versus triple equal to's, those should always be checked for. A manual reviewer might miss them, but it is possible that it is possible to detect them using automated code review tools, right? So one is that, and another is of course automated tests. So you can't always manually test things. So that, and like Bhargav already said, in fact I added this point right now, so know your types. So so basically when you know what to anticipate, the types and stuff, so that essentially type annotating your code, that is going to take you a long way towards stability and in the end a good life. So now assuming that you don't ship your code on Fridays, because then you're not in a hurry to finish it off and then go party. So it is always a good idea to have somebody else look at your code as well. So relying on other humans. So like I said, we can automate most of the stuff, but we can't, at least right now, automate the logical and design reviews. There is no tool right now that can tell you, hey, this particular design pattern does not look good. Maybe do it like that, or that this particular logic does not look good. So that's something that you'll have to rely on humans to do that. And then, of course, ensuring about 100% test coverage. I understand it is not very easy to ensure 100% test coverage. There are stuff. I mean, you can mock stuff, but if you are coming from if you are trying to add tests to an existing code base, then it is hard to reach 100%. But just to reach 100%, don't try not to do stuff like expect the received and received. I mean, you know, expect uh, don't check the value to be equal to the value. I mean, the example here, expect received to equal received. So that will probably increase test coverage, but not, uh, but that won't be of any value. And then use static analysis tools to find and fix common bugs. Right. So, like I said, so some of the stuff can be detected automatically, and those should be detected automatically, and the rest of the stuff should be left to the manual reviewers, the human reviewers. So let us then talk about what exactly are static analysis tools, right? So if you look at it, if you look at a particular human being who is reviewing your code, in the end, they're I mean, you can't explicitly say so, but they are a kind of static analysis tool. You can't call a human a tool anymore, but uh, that's basically what they're doing. They're statically analyzing. So static basically means you're not going to run the code, and but you're only going to read it, parse it, and understand what's happening, and then maybe say stuff like this might be wrong or this might be right, because focusing on might be, because some of the stuff, while pretty clear, you don't know. For example, if you are using double equal to versus triple equal to, you don't know if the programmer intentionally did that. So you don't know if how, but we can always say that, hey, this is not usually how it's done, but if you have a particular reason for it, go ahead and merge this code. So that's what a human being is going to say, and that's what static analysis tools do as well. So even if you think you have never used a static analysis tool, you probably have used it, especially in JavaScript. Not especially in JavaScript, in fact, in any programming language, if you have used some kind of compiler, if you have used some kind of linter. For example, if you have used ESLint with your project, then you have used static analysis tool. ESLint is a static analysis tool. Your compilers often do some kind of static analysis before creating a, before creating a binary, or before compiling it into bytecode or whatever your language is. And in fact, even the JS minifiers, I think there's a library called Tensor, and all these other languages. So they can't basically compile it into minify your JavaScript code without also statically analyzing it. So you have used static analysis tools, even if you think you have not. And of course, deep source is also a static analysis tool. So we get access to your code. We read your code through, if you have a GitHub account, you connect your GitHub account with deep source, and then deep source gets read access to your code, and of course, and it reads your code and tells you what could be an issue with your code. So this is sort of what a static analysis tool would try to read. So that the code on top, the function printfs, this is something that you write. But in order to statically analyze, I mean, one way would be to read it word by word, functio space, so you know that's the function. So essentially, you're tokenizing it. But all static analysis tools generally run on abstract syntax trees, which is what is generated at the bottom. So I've used ASTExplorer.net to generate this. So that is what static analysis tool is going to is going to read, because it is, of course, it is easier to do so, and there are often existing libraries that will convert your code. For example, your JavaScript code. JavaScript has a library to convert your JS code into an abstract syntax tree. And yeah, so there are, like I said, there are existing tools uh, that use static analysis. So ESLint is the most common one. So this is open source, and I think most projects are already using ESLint. There is a new tool that's called Roam. Uh, I'm not sure that everybody would be aware of it, but they tend to their aim is to combine all of the stuff that you use using different tools. For example, minifying, and even the work that ESLint does, and all of that, and even formatting like Prettier. So combine all of that into a single tool. The site is roam.tools. This is again open source. So that seems to be an interesting project. and of course deep source because I work at deep source. So right. So now now why use deep source? So other than the fact that I work at deep source and I work on these tools, there are a lot of other important reasons to use deep source. For example, focusing on fixing issues that are raised. But uh, but the thing about ESLint is when you run ESLint in your CI, for example, so you get a lot of logs, and then you don't know what to do with those logs, right? So let's say you run ESLint for the first time on your code base, and then you see, say, 1,000 issues that were detected in your code, and you don't know what to do with your code, right? So you don't know which one to fix first. So that is where deep source helps. So we'll see how deep source helps fix helps in deciding which issues to fix first. And of course, if anybody has used ESLint, they would know that ESLint is extremely noisy if you don't configure it properly. Right? So what we have seen in most open source projects that used to use ESLint and then moved on to deep source. So when they used ESLint, they usually only had a few rules enabled. For example, the most common rule is double equal to triple equal to. So in their cases, they would only enable they would only enable this rule, and so ESLint would only detect that particular issue in their code. But yeah, but and also enabled ESLint prettier so that they could find the formatting issues in their code. But that's not the case anymore with deep source. So all you have to do is in deep source, all you have to do is add 2 lines, and even that has a wizard, so you don't have to do anything at all. And fewer false positives. So in ESLint, you have to configure a lot in order to reduce false positives. For example, if you are using an existing library from Node modules, for example, so ESLint is going to tell you that this particular module is not found. So why are you importing this? However, deep source fixes that issue. That's just one example. And another thing is that at deep source, we take false positives very seriously. One, we try to reduce it as much as possible on the level of code. But if you even then, if you find some false positive in your code, so there's a very easy way to report false positives to us, and we get back to you as soon as possible, so that you don't have to see those false positives anymore. We'll fix that as soon as possible. And then we have so one more thing. So you don't do in ESLink, you don't actually see how much test coverage you have for, like I said. So you need to have as much test coverage as possible, right? So that's something that deep source tracks for you as well. uh, so that is these are some of the things. And then like I said, so you could have, say, 1,000 issues raised in your code all at once. And of course, ESLint also does a decent enough job, not exactly the best, but decent enough job at automatically fixing some of those issues. But deep source raises around 600 issues and fixes around 70 of them. So I guess the number is 76 or 77. So that so that the issues that are raised in your code, you don't even have to worry about fixing them, because deep source will automatically fix it for you. And now there's like I also said, that there's a formatter called Prettier. So most people run this, or there's Prettier, there's standard. Some people even run ESLint on their code to format all these style issues. Basically, to make the code look good, so there are certain style guidelines that you can follow, like whether you're using these many line spaces. I think Python has 80 character length, used to have 80 character length. So and of course, and yes, JavaScript also has curly braces. So where to put the curly braces, whether to put a space after this, whether to break the lines between when you're defining objects, whether to break the lines, and whether to have a trailing comma or not have a trailing comma uh, in your JavaScript code. So these are the things that Prettier, Standard, all these tools fix themselves. But let's say you're running an open source project, and your open source project, there are so many people contributing. So if this project were an internal project, you could easily tell everyone that, hey, why don't you install this, why don't you configure this pre-commit hook that runs prettier before you push your code. But in case, especially in case of open source projects, you can't, you can suggest this, but it is unlikely that people are going to run that. So deep source does that automatically for you. So if you enable transformers, so we call them transformers. If you enable a transformer, then a deep source is automatically going to run that transformer on your code and even commit the transformed code. So you don't have to worry about anything at all. So essentially, you get to run all of the code. You get to enforce all of your guidelines as much as you want to. So I'll probably take some time to demo how deep source works. Yeah, I believe my screen is still visible. So I navigate to deepsource.io, login, and sign in with GitHub. So we'll see how easy it is to configure analysis on deep source. So I'll just click on activate a new repo and demo JavaScript. So unlike existing tools, this is all you have to do. Now, of course, you don't want analysis to run on some certain files, right? Right. So let's say you don't want it to run on this. So we'll add this. Sorry, .min. I guess that's the convention. .min.js. And then we'll do it for React code because this is a React meetup. Right? And of course, like I said, we also have transformers. So I'll also add a transformer here. Let's say we'll add prettier and commit to GitHub. Now this is all there is. Now an analysis has been created. So if you look here, an analysis is running on this. And once this completes, yeah, in 13 seconds. So there are about 89 issues that have been raised, and because we only enable React, so the repo itself had other packages as well. It has React, TypeScript, Vue, but we are only going to show it for React. So some of the code. So it also, of course, it also runs on other files, but it is not looking specifically for TypeScript specific issues, or it's not looking specifically for Vue specific issues. It is only going to look for React specific and general JavaScript issues. So now this is this is something that uh, I think this is something that Wilbur was also talking about. Font size. He was configuring font size in one of his in his animation demo. So now this font size is not actually allowed in the style components. They don't actually allow hyphenated ones, so they have to be converted to camel case before that. But you don't know exactly why DSOS raised this issue. So if me, for example, I don't know a lot of JavaScript, like you know from my introduction, right? So what I'll do is go to the description and see what exactly that means. So in JSX, all DOM properties should be camel case to be consistent with standard JS style. Yeah, it can be a possible source of error if you are used to writing plain HTML. So this is basically, so if you have class, you have class name and stuff. Right. So what I'll do is now there are 6 of these. If I open my editor and start fixing all of them, it is going to be a pain. Right. So I'll just click on autofix. Yeah, autofix all of them. So it takes a very little amount of time to actually do this. So and in fact, only 7 seconds to do that. And once you're done with these, so you can select or deselect if you think this was intentional somewhere. This class changes to class name. So if you want, you can remove this from the patch that will be generated. But I think this is the correct thing. So let us just create a pull request here. And here we have the pull request. So this is basically it. Now we also see that the transformer was run, right? So we also enabled prettier transformer. So after the transformation, uh, we see format code with prettier. So there were some changes that prettier made. So single quotes became double quotes and all these things. So so this is what Deep Source is going to help you with a lot. So you don't have to worry about enforcing any of our guidelines anymore. Right? So only after all these checks pass, in fact, you can even configure this that only after all these checks pass, you can you should sorry yeah, require which status checks to pass. So you can maybe say deep source transformers and deep source JavaScript to pass before this. And there's another thing called test coverage. So this is something that we track as well. Now, all that you need to do to track your test coverage is you install the deep source CLI. So this is basically your this is your code. So we have a repository called Ike. So pretty explanatory why. And so what we do is we let's say we run this. Right. So we install your deep source CLI. So you call this, and then all you do is whatever test coverage report that was generated from your tests. So yarn and yarn coverage, and then you basically just pass it on to deep source. So deep source report, and that's how you get all of this. So even in any particular pull request that you have, if you want to if you want your pull request to uh, yeah, if you want your pull request to not have to not pass your checks to not pass if there are no tests in the new lines. For example, if I enabled test coverage analyzer, so also to do that you need to have the test coverage analyzer enabled. So when we went to configure, I think I'll show it here. Right, so in your deepsource.toml, you can easily you can configure this. So name equal to test coverage, enabled equal to true, and you're done. So this is basically all that you have to do in order to set up test coverage. So that was about the demo of deep source. And then now the question that comes. So what if I already use ESLint? What should I do after that? So I mean, so if you already use ESLint and are not convinced enough about why to use deep source, so like I already gave you some examples. So raising issues in your CI system and browsing through all the logs, it is going to be noisy. You don't know which issues to fix first. So usually what people end up doing is restricting the number of rules that are raised. So if you are only configuring it for style issues, if you're only configuring for formatting issues, then you are not exactly using exactly using ESLint in a better way. And so also we also add a lot of issues on our own that ESLint does not support at all. Of course, we have a superset of all the rules that ESLint has. So so we support and autofix a lot more rules than ESLint does. And convenience would be a huge factor on why to use deep source. I mean, that is one of also one of the reasons. And of course, if you have already configured ESLint to do what you want to do, and you already have reduced all the issues in your code. So deep source already supports, if you have any existing ESLint configs, so ESLint RC, ESLint RC.js, in any kind of config. So deep source supports that. And even if you have all those formatter configs, for example, you have Prettier RC. So if you configure your Prettier RC to use single quotes instead of double quotes, then deep source is going to honor that and use that. So that is pretty much what it is.